Good evening. I just want to make sure that everyone understands the interpretation function on Zoom. To turn on simultaneous interpretation, you'll find a globe at the bottom of your screen. You may need to click More, and then you can select the language. You will see interpretation or a globe symbol, and you will select the language you want to listen to. Si necesita escuchar interpretación al español,
if you need to listen to the interpretation, you can look for the globe icon on your screen, at the bottom of your screen, or otherwise you have to click on More. There you can click and select your preferred language.
I think we're ready for the video. We're not hearing the sound.
Yo voté por Maduro. Yo voté por Maduro. Yo voté por Nicolás Maduro.
¡Sube la mano, revolucionario! ¿Qué les pareció? Nosotros somos alegría, energía, fuerza, de noche y de día, porque somos los hijos del Hugo Chávez Fría.
Y el oro es de Venezuela. Nuestras riquezas naturales, las grandes bellezas de nuestra patria pertenecen a la patria de Bolívar, de Zamora y de Chávez. Así que bueno, decimos a nuestra gente, ¡ayúdame, Venezuela! BBC will not show. These are the people that the Guardian will not show, because we know the revolution will not be televised. So it is our duty to make sure, yes, the revolution will be televised, that we will tell the truth about what is really happening in Venezuela, that there is no dictatorship here, that yes, there is democracy, and this democracy is participatory, this democracy is protagonistic, this democracy belongs to the Venezuelan people.
Welcome to the Venezuela Solidarity Network's monthly webinar, Eyewitness Venezuela, a new presidential term and the Anti-Fascist Conference. My name is Jill Clark-Golub, and I am your moderator for the night. I am coordinator of the Americas Without Sanctions campaign and a member of the Venezuela Solidarity Network, Nicaragua Solidarity Coalition, and Friends of Latin America. Thank you for joining us today for a discussion with first-hand accounts from on the ground in Venezuela. People from around the world traveled to Venezuela 2 weeks ago for the inauguration of President Nicolas Maduro for a new presidential term and to participate in the International Anti-Fascist Festival. Tonight's speakers will share their insights on the presidential inauguration and the ongoing struggle of the Venezuelan people to defend their sovereignty and self-determination against U.S.-led threats and sanctions. The Venezuela Solidarity Network is a new North America-based network of organizations and individuals working to defend Venezuela's sovereignty and self-determination against U.S. government-led sanctions and attacks. Our website is www.venezuelasolidaritynetwork.org. The sponsoring organizations of the Venezuela Solidarity Network include Alberto Lovera Bolivarian Circle, New York City, All African People's Revolutionary Party, Alliance for Global Justice, Chicago Alba Solidarity, Code Pink, Fire This Time Movement for Social Justice in Canada, Friends of the Congo, International Action Center, Just Peace Advocates, Louis Riel Bolivarian Circle of Toronto, Orinoco Tribune, Popular Resistance, Revolutionary Communist Group, Rock Around the Blockade, Sanctions Kill Campaign, Task Force on the Americas, Venezuela Analysis, Workers' World Party. We encourage you to join the SN. For today's webinar, we will have a panel of 4 excellent speakers followed by a question and answer period. We will only take questions after the panel is over. If you have questions during the panel, please type them into the Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom screen, as we may miss questions posted in the chat. We will first hear from Sam McGill. Sam was a delegate from the Revolutionary Communist Group to the Anti-Fascist Congress and Festival in Caracas in November 2024 and January 2025. She is the Venezuela correspondent for Fight Racism, Fight Imperialism newspaper in Britain. You have the floor, Sam, and thank you for being with us tonight.
Thanks so much for inviting me. Okay, I'm going to make 2 points. The first is that the Venezuelan masses support the continuation of the Bolivarian Revolution. They voted for Maduro to continue with this task, and they're prepared to defend that vote despite all the media lies and US-funded opposition violence. This was really clear on the streets on the 9th and 10th of January, as you saw from the video. When asked about media claims that Venezuela is a dictatorship, people told us, here there is democracy. The streets prove it. The streets speak for themselves. More than 120 countries have recognized Maduro, and the ceremony inside the National Assembly in Caracas was attended by delegates from 125 countries, whilst there were over 2,000 delegates from all over the world for the Anti-Fascist Festival. The imperialist countries are in the minority. The second point is that the communes, the building blocks of socialism in Venezuela, are going from strength to strength, and this is fully backed by Maduro. Some Western leftists try to draw a distinction, saying they support the communal movement but oppose Maduro and the Venezuelan state. We interviewed Angel Prado, communal leader from the renowned El Maizal commune, who is today the Minister of Communes, and he emphasized that it was Chavez and the PSUV government that first gave the impetus and resources for the communes to grow. And likewise, it is the communes and the working class who've repeatedly organized to defy sanctions and coup plots and prevent the overthrow of the Bolivarian Revolution. And Maduro is committed to continue this process and has renewed the focus on the communes, and it is truly inspiring to see this in practice. Over 5,000 communes organize in their neighborhoods to identify and address needs of their communities. We visited the emblematic El Panal 2021 commune in the 23rd of Enero barrio in Caracas, where communal activists Jorge Quereguan explained how participatory and protagonist democracy transcends representative democracy. They elect a communal council, but in order for that council to make key decisions, it has to call an assembly, and they all have to agree with that decision. El Panal has a communal economic district characterized by social ownership and an anti-capitalist economic mode of production. We visited the textile workshop, which produces uniforms and other clothes. They produced 5,200 free school uniforms for local schools last year, and instead of producing profits, they produced surplus for social reinvestment. So far, the surplus from the textile workshop has supported the opening of a communal laundry, which in turn provides investments for a chemical workshop which produces quality, low-cost household cleaning materials for the neighborhood. This participatory democracy in decision-making and production is never reported in our media. The PSUV has channeled new funds into the communes, facilitating a series of popular consultations where communes propose and vote on priority community projects, receiving direct state financing to implement them. And we saw the tangible impact of this process, which I'll show in a video in a moment. We also exchanged with rural communal organizers on the issue of food sovereignty. 95% of items contained in the CLAP food boxes handed out every 2 weeks are now produced in Venezuela, an outstanding feat for a country that only a decade ago imported the majority of its food, and some items come directly from rural communes. We visited a huge camp of communal activists from rural campesino and fishing communities, gathered to support the inauguration and exchange ideas. Comrades from the movement of small farmers explained how food is brought from the campesino producers to the urban communes for distribution at agreed economical prices. And this is bypassing speculation. So these examples are why there is continued mass support for the PSUV, the Great Patriotic Pole Coalition, and for Nicolas Maduro. It is up to anti-imperialists to break through the media blockade and oppose sanctions, which for us in Britain includes the continued theft of over $1 billion worth of Venezuela's gold in the Bank of England. So I'm going to leave it there, and there's a couple of short videos we wanted to share. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Sam. I look forward to the videos.
Nosotros no entendemos de otra forma de hacer transición hacia el socialismo que no sea por la comuna. La comuna para nosotros es el corazón de la revolución bolivariana.
La comuna es el futuro de Venezuela y este año se han disputado 3 elecciones a través de los circuitos comunales donde el presidente Nicolás Maduro ha aprobado recursos que equivalen a $10.000 por cada circuito comunal y hay más de 4.530 circuitos comunales donde la gente es quien elige la realidad del territorio y a través de los circuitos comunales, que son las comunas consolidadas que existen dentro de nuestro país, para arreglar con sus propias manos los problemas que existen dentro de las comunidades. Es un modelo exitoso, es un modelo democrático, participativo y protagónico, no representativo. Nosotros con las comunas y los consejos comunales demostramos que en Venezuela no hay dictadura, que en Venezuela se está estableciendo un gobierno democrático y lo estamos preparando para que todo el mundo lo conozca y que sea el proyecto de democracia del futuro.
De nosotros fue el 25 de abril del 2023, donde ganó, del primer lugar fue la ambulancia, el segundo lugar fue los productos químicos para fumigación. ¿Sí? Ya eso está en práctica. El segundo proyecto popular fue la caminería desde el Aguasalú, que Aguasalú es la estación del metro, unas caminerías, unas escaleras que están allí, se están remodelando todavía y está en ejecución.
Soy vocera de salud del pueblo arriba de Guarena. Aquí nosotros restauramos este sector, esta parte de odontología que estaba en malas condiciones. Se corrigieron el alumbrado, se corrigieron también la tubería de agua que no estaba funcionando y se colocó la mayoría de las que estaba dañado, se corrigieron.
Nosotros no
We're here at the Ring Canal in Caracas, Venezuela. There are over 2,000 activists here at this massive camp that's been organised with community activists to come together and discuss. Right now there are 2,000 people here and more on their way.
Uno de los objetivos políticos de este tipo de congregación de actividad política es precisamente las mesas de trabajo y de debate, de donde saldrán los insumos políticos, escritos, teóricos, reflexivos, que más adelante esos insumos podrán ser utilizados en las diferentes escuelas de formación política para la juventud comunera.
Sea necesario, allí estaremos organizando nuestras comunas, organizando nuestro poder comunal para avanzar.
There are over 4,000 communes in Venezuela. So many of them are represented here. We've been exchanging with people from the agricultural sector, the fishing sector. It's been so inspirational seeing how the campesinos organize in defense of the revolution, how they use how their different labor mechanisms, which is just so different to capitalist modes of production.
Estamos ahorita avanzando en la economía y sobre todo en la producción, donde ahorita tenemos siembra de plátano, siembra de hortalizas, tenemos animales, que tantas cosas no tenemos. Nosotros los venezolanos y las venezolanas, las mujeres que hemos aguantado todo tipo de guerras cognitivas, hoy más que nunca seguimos en revolución, porque sabemos que en revolución, ¿dónde vamos? a mejorar nuestra mejor calidad de vida, aunque nos ha golpeado mucho las sanciones. Nosotros hemos aguantado la pela en Venezuela.
Por otra parte, existe también el tema de las atenciones gratuitas a todos y todas los participantes. Tenemos especialidad de atención gratuita para las personas con algún tipo de discapacidad. Aquí está el tema de la misión salud también, las vacunaciones. Hay diferentes tipos de vacunas aquí gratuitas. Tenemos la estación de oftalmología para los lentes gratuitos de las personas. El ser humano por delante antes que el capital. El ser humano por delante, más allá del capital. Como diría Iván Mesar.
Comuna o nada, comuna o nada.
Comuna o nada.
Thank you so much, Sam, for your words and for those videos, which I hope will find a home on the Venezuela Solidarity Network's website. And I look forward to hearing more from you during the Q&A session. Now we'll have Carolina ESCARRÁ GIL. Carolina is a Venezuelan political analyst and professor at the International Communications University, LAUICOM, in Caracas, Venezuela. Among other work, Carolina appears frequently as an invited guest on Telesur and is the general director of the Carlos ESCARRÁ Malavé Comprehensive Training School of the Venezuelan National Assembly. Carolina will be speaking in Spanish, and just to remind those who may not be, didn't hear the instructions before, you can go to the bottom of your Zoom screen. If you need to listen to interpretation, click the three dots where it says more, and you should find interpretation and can select the language in which you would like to listen. Carolina, please, you have the floor.
Buenas tardes a todos. Voy a hablar en español porque me preparé para esto y voy a leer algo que escribí. Voy a detener.
Comenzaré por recordar que el 10 de enero se
I will remind you that in January 10th, it was Maduro's inauguration, who we must remember that won with 51% and over the opposition candidate, who had a lot of media protection, especially in the social medias and other press. It's important to say that in Venezuela, most of the voters that voted on July the 28th are mainly adults and people that are not involved so much with social media. He received the key, and as we saw in some speech, everything that she mentioned about the communes, it's important to say that this was done by the women with children who created this presidential band in a space in which President Nicolas Maduro called us upon to deepen on the transformations that are needed for a better democracy, more participatory. And it's important to say as well that we were there, we went to vote under the government plan that Nicolas Maduro presented, in which the first transformation that he was presenting was the economic transformation that is related to an economy related to sovereignty rent. What does this mean? That we will emphasize on the economic aspect to export the products done in Venezuela, and because of the coercive measures received by the United States and the Europe Union have been blocked until now. The second aspect is the development in science, education, and culture, especially to strengthen something that they wanted to steal from us with the plans of South commands that you can see in the plans of the United States against our country. And with those plans, they've tried to destroy our national identity. This is very important to understand. It's related to the nation concept that they want to affect at an international level, not only the United States, but imperialism as a whole. That is to say, all the countries that are very powerful in the NATO, etc. Also, in this second transformation that we're talking about science and technology, it's related to that economic development as well. In the second part of the plan that Maduro presented is to integrate territorial security. During this week, we saw, for example, that it was established when one of the criminal movements was fought. You might have heard of Tren del Agua, Tren del Llano, that have affected our internal security in Venezuela. And the fourth element of this plan of the 7 transformations is the social development with new dimensions. It's related to the new missions of new generations. It's very related to what our comrade Sam told us. It's related to what communities have done at local levels, but also in the sectorial aspects. For example, older people, the children and teenagers working especially on just education, health, and accommodation as well. The fifth element of this national plan, and is the plan that we all voted for, is related to the modernization of the state, the political transformation of society, mainly in what is related to the participatory and protagonist democracy. You must know that part of what created such a strength in Chavez was the vision that in Venezuela we have a participatory and protagonist democracy, not which is related to the classified. The sixth aspect of this plan that was presented is related to the climate crisis and ecological development, and to understand cities as with their integral right to have public services that have been affected due to the coercive measures, and these must be transformed. This includes water, lighting, and 2 days before the elections, there was an electrical attack, and it was reflected in the cyber attack that happened on July the 28th. And that's why the Electoral Council is still affected. The seventh aspect is related to geopolitical, with the insertion spaces of the our revolution in the world, and with a very deep vision of defending peace in all in the whole world. President Nicolas Maduro, in his inauguration speech, invited us to deepen on these transformations, technological, economical, political, social, but also he reminded us a new proposal of going to a constitutional reform, something that is very important because Mr. Chavez had proposed this in 2007, and almost 20 years after that, the interpreter apologizes, the sound is cutting a little bit off. And elements as, for example, the communes and other elements that are not part of our national constitution. And this is where we want to move to. Since Commander Chavez decided on this transition towards socialism. So almost 20 years after that, as I mentioned, we are ready for those challenges. We are not alone in the world fighting against fascism weapons, and we are going towards a fight together. And as Sam showed us as well, we got together in Caracas to support the Bolivarian revolution and President Maduro, and to strengthen our ties with among peoples and develop specific actions on the Anti-Fascist Festival. I participated in 4 of the 5 meetings that we had on the creation of this anti-fascist network. And when the festival was finishing, with the help of a technological platform, we created an articulation to be able to have our sovereignty group. We created on content, dissemination, and we proposed the creation of a radio and an editorial for the network, and also a program of communication. So we honored all the communicators that died in Palestine as well. We created this communication program to share our experiences, to defend our peoples. It's also a space for literary creation, and everything is done on the framework to place Venezuela as the main guide to fight against fascism. And this is also related to the Trump's inauguration, when we saw in the first line all the people that were supporting him in the first line, and our talent is today. I don't know how long I still can speak, but the challenges are related to, of course, what Trump is going to do. Maduro has said openly that we are willing to receive all the immigrants that we have, and that we are willing to receive them all through a plan that President Maduro has developed 3 years ago, which is the plan Vuelta a la Patria, and for us to receive our nationals again in our country. With these words, I cover the 4 elements that I was asked to talk about during this webinar. Thank you so
Muchas
much.
gracias, Carolina.
Thank you
Muy
so much,
instructivas tus
Carolina.
palabras
Your words have been very
terminaste
instructive,
temprano,
and
así que
you
hiciste
finished
una gran
early,
tarea
so
y en menos
you,
tiempo
you
que lo
did a
has
great job
So, with my
in
thanks
less
to
time.
Carolina, we'll go on to our next speaker. We next have Roger Harris. Roger Harris is a member of the U.S. Peace Council and is active with the Task Force on the Americas, the Sanctions Kill Campaign, and he is a founding member of the Venezuela Solidarity Network. You have the floor, Roger.
Thank you so much, Jill. And so let me just share the screen because I want to show you what we saw when we internationals who came to Venezuela to accompany the presidential inauguration on January 10th and to attend the concurrent Anti-Fascist Festival. This is what greeted us at the airport when we got off the plane. It was a wanted poster for one Edmundo Gonzalez Urrutia. So who is Edmundo Gonzalez? He is a person who was claiming that on January 10th, he would be the one who would be elected, inaugurated as the Venezuelan president. So what I would like to do is give you some background as to why that situation came about. And I'm going to now try to unshare my screen, but I'm not finding it. The unshare button there. Give me 1 second. There we are. Thank you very, very much. And so what happened, and this is sort of like giving a little bit of background into what was going on. Because from the very inception of the Bolivarian Revolution, a quarter of a century old right now, it began with the election of Hugo Chavez in 1998. And from the very inception, the United States has interfered in and attempted to overthrow the revolution, the Bolivarian Revolution, by mainly extra-legal means. Recall that in 2015, US President Obama incredulously declared Venezuela to be an extraordinary threat to the national security of the United States. And this certification has been renewed by each subsequent US president. In a sense, they were correct. Venezuela, of course, does not pose a threat to Venezuela in terms of national security in a military way, but it does pose what you might call a threat of the good example to the Yankee empire. Venezuela has prioritized the needs of the people who produce the nation's wealth, the working people, over that of the corporations. And that's insufferable for the hegemon in the North. It has also been an exemplar for the world for independence and sovereignty, defying the US hegemony. And when people voted for Nicolas Maduro on July 28th, they were saying to the US empire, go take a war, go take a hike. Perhaps most threatening to the US empire is that Venezuela has been a leader in the world in many sense, a leader in supporting the Palestinian resistance and has championed regional unity and regional integration. Tragically, the United States has imposed unilateral coercive measures, what they euphemistically call sanctions. These are illegal under international law, and they alone have caused some 100,000 deaths, according to the United Nations. So they are as deadly as bombs. With nearly 1,000 US sanctions against it, Venezuela is one of the most sanctioned countries in the world. And that shows you that the imperialists understand the seminal importance of Venezuela, that the pivotal importance of Venezuela, because they want to destroy the Bolivarian Revolution, not merely change who the president is, but change the whole social and economic system. We saw that in the short-lived US-backed coup in 2002, which temporarily deposed Chavez. But the poor and working people of Venezuela rose up then, faced down the military, and in a short 47 hours brought their elected president back. Let's talk about the current far-right insurrectionary opposition and their claim that the US-backed candidate won the July presidential election by a landslide of 70%. That's 7 out of every 10 people in Venezuela. But if that were true, they could easily have installed Gonzalez as their president. They could have faced down the military easily if they had that much popular support. The Venezuelan people did it for Chavez in 2002. But the truth of the matter is that the opposition, the far-right opposition, is largely an astroturf opposition fomented by Washington. All three elections of Nicolas Maduro, that was in 2013, 2018, 2024, they were all deemed fraudulent by the United States. And that was prior to the actual votes. The United States decided that that if the Venezuelan people voted for Maduro, it would be, by the very fact that they did that, it would be illegitimate because the people did not vote for the candidate approved by and backed by the United States. Farcically, 2019, you might recall, the United States recalled a 35-year-old security asset. His name was Juan Guaido. He had never even run for national office, and he was unknown by 80% of the Venezuelans as the interim president. And that lasted to 2023, when Juan Guaido's own opposition, the bloc that supported him, gave the corrupt puppet the boot. And now, what we saw right now in Venezuela is that from farce, history has again repeated itself in Venezuela, with Washington's mechanisms in the run-up of the 2024 Venezuelan presidential election degenerated into just plain silliness. First, the United States designated this woman, Maria Corina Machado, from the opposition's far-right insurrectionary fringe as the unified leader. The unified leader of what was in fact a fractious gaggle of warring politicians. Machado, as the US knew well in advance, had been disqualified from running for office back in 2015 because of constitutionally mandated offenses. She personally chose the completely unknown Gonzalez, who had no political experience, as her surrogate, even without the pretense of some public vetting process. So the United States fingered Machado as the leader of the opposition, and then Machado personally chose a surrogate, Gonzalez. Now, this infirm surrogate spent the 2024 campaign in Venezuela not campaigning, but convalescing in Caracas. And he ran on the supremely unpopular platform of privatizing everything and realigning Venezuela's foreign policy to mirror the United States. Unsurprisingly, the Venezuelan Electoral Authority, which was subsequently verified by their Supreme Court, found that Gonzalez lost. He lost with a count of 43% of the vote compared to Maduro's 52%. After all, shuttering public schools and hospitals while cheering genocide in Palestine is not exactly a winning ticket. It's not a popular ticket. Popular maybe in Washington, but not in the streets of Venezuela. Equally unsurprisingly, Washington called fraud. The Gonzalez's handlers claimed that they had overwhelming evidence that he won. And this was echoed in the corporate press. He was in effect elected by the corporate press, the Western press. But to this day, Gonzalez has failed to present that evidence to the Venezuelan electoral authorities, even though he was summoned to do so by their Supreme Court. What that means is that even if he had indeed won, There was no constitutional way of making him president unless he was willing to show the evidence to the electoral authorities, and the Supreme Court, which he failed. Instead, as we know, Gonzalez voluntarily left Venezuela last September. And that undermined the already deflated far-right opposition. And the silliness continued 4 months after the election, a full 4 months after the election. The Biden administration woke up and declared Gonzalez to be president-elect. And on cue, the hapless Gonzalez pledged to return to Caracas on inaugural day to receive the presidential sash. But as we found out, he was a no-show. Venezuela looks very good. The prospects are very good for the future. And I'll turn this back to Jill. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Roger. That was an excellent summary of what's going on there. And I look forward to more engagement during our question and answer period. And I do encourage people, I see we've got some questions in the Q&A box. If you are thinking of something, please be sure to write your question in there so that we can catch it and use that to engage with the speakers after this last presentation. So last but not least, we have David Paul. David was a member of the Embassy Protection Collective who fought to defend the Embassy of Venezuela in the United States against right-wing attack and takeover in 2019. David is a member of the Sanctions Kill Coalition, Task Force on the Americas, and Democratic Socialists of America. Thank you for being here tonight. David, you have the floor.
Okay, thanks. I'm sorry for my voice. I'm fighting a cold that I caught on the way back from Venezuela. I want to first start just with some comments and things I learned and was inspired by a lot of the Venezuelans I talked to at the conference, but mostly in the streets and visiting communes and the commune camp as well. Things that they wanted me to know and remind us about. And one is that the Bolivarian Revolution has its roots in hundreds of years of struggle in Latin America for human rights, and that Chavez's political revolution really ignited a sense of pride and dignity and feeling of the importance of self-determination and the need to defend their sovereignty, which is still very much alive today. And they reminded me that we have to realize that this is a process of building and deepening the kind of democracy they're building there. And in a path with a vision and a path toward a more just society, a socialist society, a communal society. But it's, and they rejected sometimes challenges to say it's not socialist enough. And therefore other people can't support it. I heard many comments about kind of get a sense of how they saw themselves in this process, saying Chavez is the people and we the people are Chavez. We are the government. When questioned about do they have big disagreements, especially among the commune members, what big problems do they have, with the government? And many of them just said, we are the government. And they said they're in a process and they've been of being awake to what's really, what are the stakes that they're facing in the world. And many of them commented about one of the important tools to fight fascism and imperialism is consciousness, is ideology. And they're very serious from the variety of campesinos that I talked to, very serious in studying what's happening in the world. And they talked about it's a long-term strategy, this process. And one of the main things I heard in the most strong way was they know what it would be like if the right-wing opposition, the fascist opposition, the US allies would take over, and they are going forward. They would not let that happen, they said, and they were not turned back. This was very important in terms of the raising consciousness the commune union, their new priority, which has been for a while, but they're making a new push to develop these schools, a national school of political formation, of education, and they're going to establish those in every region of the country. I think it's important for us in the North and people in wanting to be in solidarity with this process to not focus so much on the scrutinizing the details of the internal politics of Venezuela, but realize that the complexities and challenges that this government and society is facing. Basically a blockade, they're a government under siege. There's, as other people had mentioned, these deadly sanctions, the theft of their resources, the constant threats, the violence. And it's these kind of conditions that can really generate internal contradictions. And I think we all have to see that, what's happening there in that light. I think our role should be mainly to basically fight against the interference in their affairs by our governments and specifically the unilateral coercive measures, wrongly called sanctions, which are deadly and illegal. We have to make people know that they exist and what they are. And I was always impressed with what's happening in Venezuela, their courage and the sacrifice they're making, which really inspires progressive forces throughout Latin America and the world. And their effort to promote social justice is really at the epicenter of the fight against imperialism and fascism. And they often said, I don't think it's hyperbole, that they're fighting for all humanity. And that means they're fighting for us, and they deserve our support and our solidarity. They're building an authentic democracy, and they're basically organizing their people. And that's the biggest threat to imperialist elites, is when people get organized, especially poor and working class people. And that's why they're such a target of the threats and aggressions from the North. I think we ought to recognize that the information war is one of our biggest roles we can play in countering the lies against what's happening there. And there's many talking points, but I think some of the basic truths we can share is like in terms of democracy. We can show the kind of deep and various levels of democracy that's happening there through the commune systems, through the consultation elections and all the other elections, the security and transparency of their election process itself. In terms of human rights, providing free housing, healthcare, education, adequate food to millions of people is something that counters the US efforts, which are absolutely using human rights as a weapon. And they actually are one of the few countries that did not sign the Declaration of Human Rights in the United Nations, and through their policy are denying people food, denying people medicines by their blockade and their sanctions. I think one of the basic themes of the Anti-Fascist Festival and throughout the groups that I met with there was this call for unity. It's cliche to some people, but it has a real meaning. And only in unity with other groups, with our communities, with other mass movements, with other parties, between countries, can we really face the big challenge that's being faced by imperialism. And I think one of those is joining networks like the Venezuela Solidarity Network, and sharing the resources that are there, and other and groups that are part of that, like Sanctions Kill and Americans Without Sanctions has a rich array of resources to help people share films, do webinars, have interviews, organize delegations, and pressure our elected representatives who can shape policy and specifically help to pressure them to not allow this Bolivar Act that's in Congress to go through, which will codify and make into law the illegal and coercive measures of the sanctions that are currently in place, and it will be harder to change them. So I'll just leave it there, and we'll see what kind of questions we can answer for people.
Thank you so much, David. That was really a great summary of this moment and what we have to learn from what's happening in Venezuela. And I hope we'll discuss more about the importance of political education in resisting fascism. So all of our speakers were very efficient with their time. So this means that we now have over 20 minutes for discussion, but I first want to point out a few announcements. You see it posted in at 7:50. It was posted in the chat, the Venezuela Solidarity Network Toolkit. This is an important way to help you have resources available when you speak to friends and contacts about what's going on in Venezuela. I also want to let you know that there will be a Venezuela Solidarity Network webinar in February as well. The date has been set for February 25th at the same time as this webinar, which is 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. And we'll be discussing the importance of Venezuela solidarity today. So now we have until 8:15 Eastern Time or 5:15 Pacific Time for some questions and answers. And I see that we have some questions. Okay, I have a question from Hariaska Baba about the diversification of the economy. I'm going to read off a couple of questions and let our speakers respond as they feel inspired to do so. And actually, I think we want to switch to panelist view. The second question is, what was the biggest concern expressed by communards about the current events in Venezuela? So if anybody wants to talk a little bit more about the diversification of the economy and then concerns that communards in particular expressed to you while you were in Venezuela. Who wants to start off? And do we still have Carolina with us? I know she was having bandwidth problems and I'm not no, Carolina is here as well. So Carolina, you can feel free to respond as well. My screen wasn't showing everyone. I'm going to switch to gallery. So, okay, I see Sam's hand raised. Go ahead, Sam.
Thank you. Just on the question of the economy, from what I understand, that in 2023, non-oil exports, where things that Venezuela is producing and then exporting to other countries, that is not linked to the petrol industry, it made $3 billion in 2023. So you can see that whilst the oil sector is still a huge kind of part of Venezuela's economy, there has really been a big impetus to produce things for export. Some of that is food. I will find a link to an article that I found recently just detailing that. At the beginning of the year, Maduro gave an annual address to the nation in which he addressed some of these, these developments. I think the other major aspect is, the development of kind of secondary chains of production. And restarting some of the factories and kind of, industry sites that had fallen into disrepair because of the blockade. They have something called the Workers' Productive Army, which has been active now for a number of years, and it is a group of an ever-expanding group of workers, technicians who travel from site to site and organize kind of a brigade to restart production. And I know that they've been doing quite a lot of that in some of the factories and industrial sites. And the third aspect is, of course, the food sovereignty. So I think, as I mentioned, that the clap boxes are now 95% produced in Venezuela, and that's a mix of national agricultural production, like national agribusiness and the communes, and also I think about 85% of food that you can find in supermarkets is now produced in Venezuela. So that really reduces the amount of money that they have to spend on imports. So that's just some comments, and I will find that article and share it.
Thank you, Sam. Roger.
Yes, and just a few more details from President Maduro's speech, where he made his national speech when he addressed the nation, because what we saw there was a really remarkable turnaround, something unprecedented in history, for a petro-state to be able to produce 85% of the goods that you see in a supermarket by their own domestic production, because it's always easier for a petro-state that makes money by exporting oil to make money from the oil and neglect its own internal development. This was never ever done by any petro-state in the world until Maduro and the Venezuelan people worked together. And we have to understand that, go back to 2017, things looked very bleak back then. And the Venezuelan people really rallied. They helped each other. It wasn't like a there was tremendous scarcity, but rather than having a dog-eat-dog mentality, it was a mentality of cooperation and a bootstrap operation. And this is also sort of unprecedented, and it shows you why Venezuela is such a threat of a good example. Back then, going like February 2019, Maduro, in his speech, and I quote him, in February of 2019, inflation was 344,000%, hyperinflation. And when you have hyperinflation like that, everything you do creates new problems. But somehow, the Venezuelan people, the unity of the civil and military partnership and political leadership was able to turn that ship around. And today, Venezuela projects a 9% increase in its GDP, one of the very, very highest in the entire hemisphere. And the rate of inflation is the lowest that it was in 12 years. So what we've seen is the ability to Venezuela, the military, the political leadership, and the people all working together to resist the Yankee imperialists. And this is why the next 6 years, they're looking for not to get an easy ticket from Mr. Trump. They're expecting worse, but they think they have the internal ability to resist.
Thank you, Roger. I see David's hand up. Go ahead, David.
Well, I was going to speak to that second question, or the other question about the communards. The ones the commune members, communards, other common term, we took part in a lot of the workshops. We're at the camp where the commune members came from all over the country into Caracas during the time of the inauguration. And in those workshops, mostly what they were concerned with and discussing and debating, sometimes very heated, but always very camaraderie, were problems between the communes in terms of transportation, certain prices that were being set in the goods that they were trading, and a lot of logistical problems and infrastructure problems between the communes. And I think it's important to point out many of them, I hardly heard anything blaming or complaining about the the state or the government, most of the problems were with local officials, because you have to realize in Venezuela, when the political revolution happened, when Chavez came, there were still a lot of bureaucrats and local officials, mayors, even governors, all kinds of officials still in place, and many are today. And there's a lot of conflict with local government officials and bureaucrats with the communes, and deciding, well, who decides what's happening with this road or this infrastructure in this community? If there's a commune, what does the mayor have to say versus the commune assembly? So those kind of conflicts are still ongoing, and was the root of most of the discussions and conflicts in those workshops. But they also expressed quite a bit that they feel that the government of Nicolas Maduro is an ally of theirs. And this is especially, there's a new feeling of that since one of the commune leaders, Angel Prado, is now the commune ministry. And as I think Sam said earlier, it's a direct reflection of what the government of Nicolas Maduro feels about the communes, because it's continuing the legacy of Chavez and making it more real in that connection. And also these commune consultations, these elections, they're going to be having 4 a year. They had, I think, just 2 so far at the end of last year, where all the communes decide on what are their priorities, whether it be a water project, a road, whatever it is. They submit those priorities to the government, and the government gives $10,000 to each commune. And we're talking thousands of communes making those requests. So that's been a big boost to meeting their needs. And they're very happy about that. That's all.
Thank you, David. Carolina, please go ahead. Oh, we're having trouble hearing you, Carolina. Is anyone hearing her? Let's come back to you, Carolina, and hope that your sound gets better. Oh, what a shame. We really want to hear from you. I'm going to go on to another question, and we can try Carolina in a couple of minutes. Or did you want to try again now, Carolina? I see that your microphone's turned on, but I'm not hearing you. I'm sorry. Okay, I have a question here that I think is going to be very interesting and spark a lot of conversation. Katerina is asking, can any of the panelists comment on the Brazilian veto of Venezuela at the BRICS summit, a summit that included a theocracy and a couple of kingdoms not vetoed by Brazil? And the opportunity to bypass the dollar would help against sanctions. Who would like to take that one? Did you want to try, Carolina? We can't hear you. Is anyone else hearing Carolina? I don't think it's just me. Oh, so what a shame. We're not hearing you. Would someone else like to take a stab at that, Roger?
Yeah, I'll take a stab at that because it's a very good question. So for those of you who are probably familiar with BRICS, it's not a political organization. It's mainly a trade organization. Brazil is one of the founding members, along with China, India, and South Africa. And Venezuela had expected to be approved as a partner in BRICS at the last summit. It wasn't. It was vetoed by Brazil, along with Nicaragua being vetoed by Brazil. And this showed kind of how some of the geopolitical game playing goes on in Latin America. Because we have these left-leaning countries like Chile, Brazil, and Colombia, which are they triangulate between the Yankee imperialists and regional unity. And so Lula, the head of Brazil, he triangulated by trying to placate the Yankees. It was a real blow to unity amongst the left-leaning countries in Latin America, and it also goes against really the self-interest of Mr. Lula in Brazil. Because if you look at those left-leaning countries, all of which, Chile, Brazil, and Colombia, all of which will have presidential elections within the next year or two, all of them have very strong right-wing oppositions. And if the Venezuelan government were to fall, surely Petro in Colombia, Lula in Brazil, and for the whoever becomes the candidate in Chile, Boric is not eligible to run again. Those would be against an emboldened right wing. So, but these countries are caught between the hegemon of the North and their own self-interest, and sometimes they make calculations which probably are not in their own self-interest, and certainly it's not in the interest of Latin American unity and not in the interest of the Bolivarian Revolution.
Thank you, Roger. Since I see that Carolina is back, let's see if your sound is working now, Carolina. Thank you. Shoot, we're still not hearing you. What a shame. I'm sorry, Carolina. Would someone else like to address the question about the BRICS? Add anything more to what Roger said? Sam, please go ahead.
Thank you. I think what's just happened with Colombia, with the Trump administration attempting to send the deportation flights, the military planes, and that kind of crisis that was sparked, illustrates just what's at stake. That, you know, the Trump government is not going to necessarily distinguish between Petro in Colombia and Maduro in Venezuela, that they're going to increase the aggression against all the Latin American countries, or at least they have the potential to do that. And I think that Maduro came up very strongly, as he has about the Panama Canal, as he has against, kind of all of these statements of kind of aggression, the rebuilding of the wall in Mexico, that I think, he's consistently, and the Venezuelan government and the Bolivarian Revolution are consistently on the side of Latin American solidarity, utilizing networks like CELAC, the community of the Latin American and Caribbean states. And they've just called an emergency summit to discuss the aggression by Trump around migrants, Latin American migrants. So I think that this is an opportunity for these countries to, recognize who their main enemy is, and build that solidarity. And that's definitely the sense that I got from the Venezuelan comrades on the streets in January, that yes, they were disappointed in the position that Lula took and some of the interventionist statements that Petro has made in relation to the elections in Venezuela. And they said, we were on the front line shouting Lula Libre when Lula was in prison. And now, this is an attack on Venezuela. But I think this with the increased aggression of Trump, then, there is an opportunity for Latin American unity. And it is really important because I think if you've seen today, I think it was today or yesterday, the Venezuelan embassy in La Paz in Bolivia has been attacked. It's the latest embassy to be attacked, and the far right in Bolivia are waiting for their opportunity for the upcoming presidential elections later on this year to try and retake power in Bolivia. and kind of, you know, capitalize on any division there. So it just really clearly illustrates what the stakes are. And of course, for us solidarity activists in the West, then our solidarity doesn't, you know, these are questions for the Latin Americans, and we can comment on them, but essentially, you know, our role is to continue to organize against imperialist aggression against any of these countries.
Very good points. Very well put, Sam. Very glad to hear that. Let me make sure oh, Carolina, are you trying to speak now? Please go ahead. I'm so sorry. It's still not working. If you're able to write something, Carolina, and post it in the chat, we'd also be very happy to send any comments that you might have along with the recording of the webinar. We are very sorry that these technical issues are keeping people from hearing your very important information. So I have 3 more questions that I think are interesting, and I'm going to throw all 3 of them out. Oh, I'm actually, now there's a 4th one. I'm going to throw all 4 of these out and let the panelists address them as they would like to. So there's a question about, has there been an increase in commune membership or number of communes since these budget referendums began? And another anonymous attendee asks whether we expect the CNE to publish the local results of the presidential elections, and will it do so for the elections on April 27th? Another question is, are Venezuelans feeling hopeful about the future, or are they nervous about Trump? That's a good point. And then a follow-up to what we were just discussing, will there be another opportunity to join BRICS for Venezuela? Who'd like to start? Okay, David, go ahead.
Briefly, in terms of the number of communes, there has been an increase, a steady increase in communes. I mean, the consultations and voting for the getting budget help has only been going on for like half a year, but there has been an increase. I would have to say though, there are many community councils, many more community councils than communes. A group of community councils, like neighborhood councils, get together and decide if they want to be a commune. But most organized communities have community councils and are not yet in communes, but the number of communes is steadily growing. The commune union, which is trying to coordinate activities and strategies between communes, is the minority of the communes. It's growing as well, but most communes aren't part of the commune union yet. And many community councils haven't joined as a commune with other community councils. But exact numbers I don't know, but it is growing. That's all I know.
Thank you, David. Would any Roger, Sam, and we're hoping that Carolina will be able to connect again. So Roger or Sam, would you like to address any of the other questions that have been asked?
Sam, did you want to go?
Okay, thank you. I mean, on the question of the elections and the electoral results, I think we have to be aware that, you know, the council was attacked by a massive cyber terrorist attack. They actually did go back online in early August and they published a table of results, and then they were attacked again, and like it's been knocked offline since. You know, I'm not going to speak on the internal kind of, you know, plans that they are trying to get up and running. I do understand that there is a a way that you can log in to the National Electoral Council if you are a Venezuelan citizen, with your ID card. I haven't done that. I don't have an ID card. I'm not entirely sure, what aspects are there. But I think this narrative that they haven't released results is false, and we need to challenge it. They have published results. What they have been unable to do is publish kind of a really detailed breakdown of results, kind of municipality by municipality, state by state. And that is because of the massive cyber attack. And I think we also have to critically examine the claim of the results that have been published by the opposition. And the opposition published its results, these so-called results, on a website that had been set up. It was a US-based website that had been set up days before the election. So right away, that's very suspect. That, why are they setting up their own electoral website? What's the plan? How involved are they in this, cyber terrorist attack? And then secondly, I think Mission Verdad did a really good breakdown of analyzing those results, and maybe we can find that and put it in the chat, because it actually goes through some of the huge inaccuracies that have been claimed as part of these results. So they apparently published published results from apparently 30% of electoral council locations, so not the full quota, obviously, that they will be from opposition strongholds. Some of the results that were reported were peppered with inaccuracies, like relating to people whose identities of deceased people, repeat identities, repeat signatures, so it's clearly not validated. And if you look at the kind of printouts that they've produced as evidence, which, by the way, Venezuela never publishes the individual printouts, that's not part of their electoral process. They always have a QR code at the bottom, and Mission Verdad found that some of these QR codes actually link to US-based businesses. So, all of these things are oh, sorry, that's just my cat knocking my computer. All of these things illustrate that the results that are being reported in the international media about the opposition claims that Gonzalez won a landslide are entirely constructed, and they're produced in a way to make a reader quickly skim it, not actually do an in-depth investigation, and believe that they have seen results that Maduro stole the election. So I'm really hoping that obviously the CNE are able to run the elections without this kind of interference and destabilization. But yeah, this narrative that they have not produced results is I think questionable.
Thank you for that excellent background information, some of which I hadn't heard before. And I just want to remind our listeners that the attacks did not affect the electoral results. They were not able to get into the voting machines that tallied the results. It was the transmittal of results. I think that's important for people to understand, and also important for us to remember what some of you have been saying since the beginning of this. It is our job to stop the interference, and for those of us who live in the U.S., especially to stop our government's interference. So we have a creative solution to the problem that we've been having tonight with Carolina's sound. She has sent some audio messages by WhatsApp, and I'm worried that the sound might not be good enough for the interpreters, but we're going to give it a try. I'm going to put this up to my microphone, and I'm seeing the faces of the other panelists. Perhaps you can wave to me, or the interpreters can, if the sound isn't good enough for interpretation, I know David Paul is an excellent interpreter, and he'll do some consecutive interpretation. So let's give this a try, all right?
Bueno, como no tuve oportunidad de hablar en el webinar después, ¿no? De responder ninguna de las preguntas, que creo que es la parte más hermosa de participar.
I'm going to answer the question. I think this is the most beautiful part of this sessions. I heard something about the diversification of economy and the communes. Roger said that this is a process that initiated in 1994, not 1999, and this is related to the BRICS, when President Hugo Chavez, after the military rebellion, decided to run for presidency, but that year, he also met with Commander Fidel. One of the professors here, Judith Valencia, said that that meeting between Fidel and Chavez in 1994 happened once again in 2014 between Xi Jinping and President Putin. So it's a replication of the same process. We know that Brazil was quite far away from the BRICS ever since Bolsonaro took office, and now they are in the pro-tempore chair. So they have the power to let countries join BRICS. President Maduro says that we have been part of BRICS for 200 years because this was part of the multipolarity fostered by Simón Bolívar. Brazil's position was expected, like Colombia's, because the think tanks from the United States before the elections showed this position in Brazil and Colombia had to be beacons against the victory of Nicolas Maduro, or at least not to accept the victory of Nicolas Maduro. Of course, many of them are very closely linked to the United States, many of these countries. So I think Mexico's position was surprising. It was key in terms of people's sovereignty. And also there were similar situations with regards to lawfare and Lula and the non-recognition of some establishment groups in Colombia regarding Petro's election. So the Electoral Council in Mexico did not recognize the victory of Claudia Sheinbaum very quickly. That on the one hand. And then on the other hand, regarding the economy, it's important to say that in 2001, Hugo Chavez spoke of economy. I'm sorry, I cannot hear the audio very well. We cannot hear the audio anymore.
Que trabajaba en el área de los hidrocarburos, ¿no? Se crea, pues, la nueva PDVSA.
So the new PDVSA is created, and workers push for the oil industry after all the damages suffered by the oil industry. This was done led by Commander Chavez. However, after the so-called sanctions by the United States, part of this unilateral coercive measures read that any company that works with Venezuela or sells input for the reactivation of its economy or just trades with PDVSA could also be sanctioned. That would have very strong consequences for those countries. I don't know if you can share this audience at the webinar.
All right, I believe that came across. I believe our interpreter was interpreting. So this is just a little Venezuelan ingenuity working around all the obstacles that get thrown in the path. So we have now come to near the end of our webinar. We were going to give the speakers 3 minutes each for a wrap up. I wonder, since we did have a longer discussion than we thought we were going to have, maybe you could just wrap up with just 1 minute. How about we do that? And I'm just going to go in the opposite order in which you spoke. I'm going to go David, then Roger, then Sam. And I think unless I get another message from Carolina, we're going to stop there. And thank you very much for that ingenious idea, Carolina. So, David.
Oh, okay. Well, all I would say is it's really important. I mean, I was so impressed in Venezuela with them seeing this, knowing this is a long struggle. They have very little hope that there'll be anything positive coming out of Trump, and they didn't have as much hope with Biden. But they've always said that they're not going to change their course to satisfy the whims of the North American population or politicians. They know what the path that they're on, and that kind of perseverance and determination to they see as a permanent, constant struggle and commitment is really impressive. And I know everyone has their own lives here and other commitments and other struggles, but I think it's really important is that we try to unify our efforts as much as possible to counter the disinformation out there, not just about the elections, but about the whole process there. And I guess I would say the most useful thing for me when I'm talking to people, because I talk to other people beyond leftists, is really to tell people to put themselves in their shoes. What would they feel if another country didn't like our government and they were going to block medicines and food for our families? We would say that's ridiculous and have to tell them that that's what we're doing to millions of Venezuelans. That's all.
Just 1 minute, please, Roger. Thanks, David.
And I would just echo what David said, that I think the take-home message from my visit to Venezuela this time, and it's sort of the answer to that question, are people in Venezuela hopeful about the future? Are they nervous about Trump? Is yes, there is a lot of hope right now. They've just reelected Nicolas Maduro for a third term, and they see this as a period of building. We have to understand that the US sanctions have been very, very punishing. They've been specifically targeting poor and working people. They were designed to create misery. And it's the poor and working people who have most suffered under the sanctions. So while there's been an economic turnaround, they have a long way to go for full recovery, but they're very hopeful that that will happen. And then on the question of Mr. Trump, from their point of view, it's a little different than ours in North America. Here, we're kind of obsessed by Trump, either very happy or very unhappy about Trump. From them, they have gotten to the position where they see it's U.S. imperialism that's the problem, and that will be a continuity regardless of who is in the Oval Office. And that is their view. Yep, maybe they can strike a deal with Trump, but they're not counting on that because they know at the end, the U.S. is designed, the U.S. foreign policy is designed to crush the Bolivarian Revolution. There's really no accommodation that the United States will have. They might use different tactics, but they want to crush the revolution. And that's why we, as a US and Canadian and North American citizens, we need to stand in solidarity with Venezuela. And I would echo what David said about about the corporate media and their distortions of what's happening here.
Thank you, Roger. Before I give the floor to Sam, I just want to let people know that we are going to do a group photo after Sam's 1-minute wrap up. So please don't go away yet. You have the floor, Sam.
Thank you. Yeah, Venezuela is leading this anti-imperialist, anti-fascist struggle. It is putting itself as the epicenter, as I think they described it as, we will be the headquarters of this anti-imperialist, anti-fascist struggle. And it was really clear in terms of the delegates who were there at the conferences, you know, big delegation from Cuba. Cuba was mentioned a lot, especially in the context of the blockade and, you know, the list and everything. Huge delegation from Palestine, you know, Palestinian students and people shouting "Free Palestine" all the time. You know, delegations from this Alliance for the Sahel states in West Africa, you know, Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger. We have to understand these countries as, you know, an emerging new anti-imperialist pole. And Venezuela is hosting all of these people and saying, right, we need to coordinate, we need to cooperate, we need to move forward. And we have to be part of this international movement. We have a part to play in it, in the belly of the beast, in the US, in Canada, in Britain, in Europe. So, you know, we have to continue to fight the media war. We have to continue to fight the blockade. And I've really enjoyed being able to cooperate with you all. And I hope we can continue cooperating between, you know, either side of the pond, as they say.
Thank you. And now I just want to remind everyone to join the Venezuela Solidarity Network. And I believe a link to the website will be put into the chat again. And now we want to invite you all to join us for a group photo. Please grab a sign or a t-shirt in solidarity with Venezuela. I am wearing one, but I'm sorry it wasn't on screen. And you join us with a fist in the air. So I think you're going to be promoted to panelists now as I speak, and you'll receive an invitation to rejoin the webinar as a panelist through a pop-up on your screen. If you want to join in, say yes. If you haven't received an invitation to join yet, raise your virtual hand or type it in the chat. Let's see. I'll unmute now. Oh, whoops, I think everyone's going to be on mute except me.
Interpreters were great.
Oh, thank you very much to Salome and Julieta. You've done a fine job under difficult conditions. My apologies for starting off too quickly. It seemed like we had too much to do in 90 minutes, but we got it all done. So please, everyone, open your cameras. I don't know who is taking the photo. I don't know how to do that, so I hope no one expects me to do that.
I will take care of it, Jill. But
Okay,
I'm
great.
waiting for some people to upgrade.
Oh, I love your Bolivar Superman. Is that a bobblehead, Leo?
No, it's made out of ceramic.
Thank you, Carolina.
Yes, thank you, Carolina, very much. I hope you can share your comments in writing as well. I'm sorry that there were some more audios that we didn't get to. I didn't realize that. Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. Let us know when, Tamara. And thank you to Tamara and Natalia for doing tech tonight. Thank you, Leo, for being on hand for sorting questions. Thank you all for being here tonight and asking questions.
We've just got 2 people that are still trying to join before I take the photo.
I just realized I have something.
We could also sing happy birthday to Jose Marti.
All right, everybody. This is the moment. Turn on your camera. Photo.
Okay.
All right. Viva Venezuela.
Que viva.
Viva Venezuela.
Que viva.
Comuna o nada.
Comuna o nada.
Okay, one more.
Okay.
Okay, you're all beautiful.
Great.
Solidarity is beautiful.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night, everyone. We will win.
Good night, everybody.